Hello, hello. Episode 6 of DemoPod, the Demolition podcast, starring Axe and Smash. Of course, Barry Darso and Bill Eadie, and I am your host, Ryan Marr. And this is going to be a very interesting episode because, hell, if WWE is doing it, we might as well do it too. And peel back that curtain, as if every podcast episode doesn't do that. But a lot of interesting things have been happening in the world of professional wrestling, but namely WWE over the last year or so. Big regime change, lots of new partnerships, lots of new media contracts. And of course, coming up this month, June, we're going to see the debut on Netflix of WWE Unreal inside the writer's room. They are finally peeling back the curtain, letting the big secret out and making it official that, yes, this stuff is predetermined. Now, I know that that's been known for quite some time, but there was still some semblance of trying to keep Kayfabe alive in WWE, especially on TV. And if you're brand new to the world of insider wrestling terms, Kayfabe is basically the practice of maintaining the illusion that professional wrestling matches, storylines, and characters are real. And as I said, it's slowly been slipping away, but the old school lived by that rule. And of course, when we talk about old school, you got to talk about Bill Eadie and Barry Darso, Axe and Smash, Demolition. Gentlemen, how you doing?
Very good, but this is the topic that, for me in particular, is difficult to talk about. So
I can only imagine, and I'm sure Barry, you probably feel the same way as well.
Exactly. When the cat was kind of out of the bag, I still didn't even accept it then. You know.
Yeah, I mean, because you guys came up in a time frame. I mean, you both had different paths into the industry, but regardless of that, it was basically just the unwritten rule that you are being accepted into this brotherhood, this lifestyle, and you have to keep it within the ranks. When did you guys notice that start to change? Was it before you wound up in WWE? I know, Bill, you were there already. Barry, you were working for Crockett. But when was it starting to come out like, oh, wait a minute, I don't know if we're going to be able to keep the cat in the bag much longer?
Well, I don't think the town ever thought that. It was the people in the office that and it came about from what I remember in the New York, New Jersey area when they were tacking on taxes per seat per ticket.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they had raised the tax up to 25 cents per ticket per seat. And the office said, well, that's too much. And we're entertainment anyway. That's not a sporting tax, blah, blah, blah. And it didn't go over very good in the dressing room, did it, Barry?
No, not at all. You know, when I was working for Crockett, you know, we had the babyface in one dressing room, you know, the heels in the other dressing room. And if you wanted to send a message to other guys, you'd get the referee, you'd tell them, you know, hey, you know, I kind of want to work this into the match. Can you go run and tell these guys? And then they'd run over and the other team would send you a couple messages. And that's just how it was. You never were in the bars together. You didn't do any of that. And then when I left Crockett and the first day we did TV, I went in, everybody's all in one dressing room and everybody goes out one door. And right there, I just thought, holy cow, you know, but it wasn't, that wasn't yet when it was entertainment, but still that was like a step towards showing the people that it wasn't real anymore.
Yeah.
Because why didn't the fight start on the way before the curtain? You know, you're both there.
Yeah.
It was just kind of hard to, hard to realize that that's what it was like up there. And then like Bill was saying, I think it was at a pay-per-view, wasn't it, Bill, where all of a sudden Vince came out and said it's the entertainment business because they didn't want to pay the boxing commission. Isn't that what it was?
The Wrestling and Boxing Commission had raised the taxes per seat, and they thought that was gonna, by being labeled as entertainment, that was gonna not only save them a few dollars. You know, you're talking about multiple events per year.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, 25 cents, although it's high, that's protect your industry, for God's sakes. And it just didn't sit well. And even to talk about it now, after all these years, still pisses me off.
You know, and people come up and say, yeah, do you really hurt yourself, when you do it? And it's like, well, yeah, the guy punched me so hard. It did hurt. It's not like it's fake, but it hurts when somebody doesn't believe what you did. It's because that was your craft. You made it look like it was that good.
Yeah, and it irks me as a fan and as someone who spent some time as a manager on the independents as well. And I mean, I didn't go through a fraction of what you guys endured in your training and breaking into the business, but it does bother you because it seems to be the one industry, professional wrestling, that it doesn't matter where you're at. Somebody always has to comment the quote unquote obvious. I just had this conversation with a friend of mine, Anthony DiDomenico, stand-up comic, very funny guy, lives on Long Island, and he was excited to watch WrestleMania. And that's when his brother called him up on the phone and said, come on over to my house and watch WrestleMania. And Anthony said, he goes, well, who's there? And his brother was like, well, why does that matter? And he goes, it does matter. He goes, because I want to sit down and I want to enjoy the show. He goes, if you have a bunch of your buddies there, inevitably there's going to be one idiot that just says, oh, well, this shit's fake, right? Yeah, well, yeah, but so is every TV show you watch and every movie and stuff like that. It's the one thing that I think people insult the intelligence of wrestling fans by thinking that we really believe that this is real. No, we want to suspend our disbelief, which is why I can understand you guys being pissed off, because me as a fan, when I'm seeing commercials for WWE Unreal on Monday Night Raw and on SmackDown, I'm like, can't you for these 2 hours, 3 hours, let us think that it's real? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think it undermines their product. I mean, I haven't witnessed it yet, so but I would think that you're undermining what you're trying to get across, because the storylines that you're developing, aren't you trying to have people believe in them?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, it's not as bad, but I get confused with this fentanyl situation. If I was a drug dealer, why would I want to kill my customers?
Yeah.
So why would you want to let the people know that what you're producing and you're working so hard to make it look real, that it's really not real, because you're telling them it's not real?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic nowadays where, I guess maybe because it's more of a Hollywood thing with Netflix, they want to open their doors to more mainstream attention. But going back to kayfabe itself, there are some of the famous stories that got leaked to the press. And of course, that's, Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Iron Sheik getting pulled over together on the Jersey Turnpike. Years later, Rob Van Dam and who just recently passed away, Sabu, those two got caught together, involved in some activities while on the road. But were there other instances where you guys, were in a locker room? It doesn't even have to be WWE or WWF at that point. It could have been anywhere where a promoter had to come in and say, hey, listen, guys, I heard that last night at the Howard Johnson, so-and-so was sitting with so-and-so. Like, did any of that ever happen when you guys were in locker rooms?
No, it was in my case, it was sort of like an unwritten word. You didn't, especially if you're working. I remember when that Hacksaw and the Chic happened. I mean, they were involved in an angle and working against each other.
Yeah.
That years ago, that would have never happened. I know that Barry was in Mid-South, and if you got caught traveling with somebody, you'd get fired immediately.
And when that happened with Jim and the Chic, Jim was going to travel by himself, and this is the story that I've heard. And Jim was really a kayfabe guy and everything, but the Chic was stuck for a ride, and he was just getting up there, and it was like, well, Jim's the nicest guy in the world, didn't want to leave him, by himself there. And then it ended up being where Chic gets in the car and he's drinking beer and doing all this other stuff, and it was like, Jim's like, holy shit, what do I do? And then they got caught,
Yeah.
So he was just, Jim was
wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah, and the nicest guy in the world trying to help a guy out, and then, and I think that hurt Jim a lot too, because they were probably going to give him the belt and they were going to have a big run with him. And that was right before, it was real then, it didn't take, it was much later before, it came out where it was entertainment business and everything. But yeah, like Bill was saying, in Watts' territory, me and Herc, we'd be in a bar and the Rock and Roll Express would come in. First thing we would do is we'd leave, because as heels, we weren't the ones bringing the little girls into the arenas or anything. It was the Rock and Roll Express. They'd come in, the people would be going nuts over them. We didn't want to interrupt that. So it was just a written rule. We get out, we go to a different place, and then they're there,
Ever a situation that takes place on the road where you're at a restaurant, and I'll just use Rock and Roll Express as an example, Barry, because you just mentioned them. Are you ever in a restaurant or any type of situation where your opponent does wind up walking in unbeknownst to you, but people do see it, and now you kind of got a stage, maybe not necessarily a brawl, but, a little bit of an argument, like, oh, well, tomorrow night at the Mid-South Coliseum, I'm going to kick your ass. Does any of that stuff ever go on back in the day?
We never did that, or at least I never did. But, we just, didn't want to raise attention to it. We just got out, or they'd come in and see us, and then they wouldn't come in. That's usually what it was.
Yeah, same with me. I mean, and when I was during the Mass Superstar, even in Georgia and the Mid-Atlantic area, I was told by George Scott or Ole, don't just travel by yourself. So I had no problem because I didn't stay at the same hotels. I was protecting my gimmick.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody would have come in to recognize me, I would have, played it off like they don't know I'm the wrong guy or whatever it is. So
well, and
I just stayed away.
The mask, I would imagine, was a big help too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story. So, I knew Wrestling 2 really well.
Okay.
And we're in Atlanta, and I don't know how many times we're in buildings and doing TV and everything. We were at TV, and he came up to me and he said, hey, Crush, he says, do you mind if I get a ride with you to the town? And I said, yeah, let's do it. I said, I get in at 9 o'clock in the morning. He says, I fly in at 8:45. I'll meet you out by baggage. So I come up on the rental car. I pull up, and here's this guy looking at me, and I'm going, what the hell? This guy must recognize me as Crusher Khrushchev. And I just drove forward, tried to get out of there. I thought, who's this guy? And he comes knocking on the door, and I go, yeah, what do you want? He goes, I want a ride. And I figured out that was Wrestling 2. Out of all these because he'd go in the shower, he'd shower with the mask on, he'd go to the town with the mask on, left with it. I've never seen him without a mask until that day. And then we get, a half hour to the town, he puts the mask on, and that's how we did it. I mean, that was kayfabe.
That is. And so, Bill, I got to ask you then, would you check into the hotel with the Masked Superstar mask on?
Oh no, I would wear the mask. Like Barry said, about 10 or 15 minutes before the town.
Okay.
Wear it in the ring, of course, wear it in the dressing room. I take it off for the shower and things like that. And then as soon as I left the building, I'd keep it on. And people would try to follow me literally for sometimes all the way from Augusta to Atlanta, which is 150 miles.
Wow.
And they'd follow you. But I always used to put a towel over my head. And then when I took the mask off, I put the towel between my teeth. So they'd still pull up trying to see what I looked like, but they couldn't because the towel was there. But that was my gimmick. So that was, if I let everybody know what I looked like, there's no mystery. The mystery of the mask is part of the allure.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have to protect that. But conversely, you'd get some guys in every territory had one or two. They'd have a masked guy that would wrestle, and he'd go in, take a shower, and he'd come back out. But he didn't have the mask on. He had it tucked in the back pocket with part of the mask hanging out. So, that's so-and-so. He wanted to be recognized.
Yeah.
So it killed the illusion.
Yeah.
Or the masked man would go out there with the mask, and then the next time he'd be wrestled with somebody else next.
Yeah, same boots, same tights.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've seen that on the indies a lot because guys want to double dip and get 2 paydays out of it. And not all of them did the best job at covering their tracks. But, I have to ask because there's, of course, the famous stories. And you guys were not in. Well, actually, Bill, I don't know. Maybe you'll about to tell me if you are. there are some famous stories over the years of where kayfabe started to be diminished, and it was certainly not by the choice of any of the promoters. And maybe that's what kind of led to these promoters saying, all right, we're being exposed. Let's work with this. Of course, there's the John Stossel 2020 incident with Dr. D. Dave Schultz and that whole big expose with Eddie Mansfield. And I even remember as a young kid, WWOR television here in Secaucus, New Jersey, they had a news program, which ironically Sean Mooney wound up becoming an anchor for when he left WWE. But they actually had old footage of a Bob Backlund match from Madison Square Garden. And I don't recall who Bob Backlund, I think it was Larry Zbyszko, who we talked about in the last episode, but they're working each other. And I guess there was a reporter who had a microphone close to the ring, and you could hear these guys very gingerly calling out spots in this match. Nowadays, I mean, you'll see a guy like John Cena, who I love, but he'll just be like, clothesline, duck it. Back then, guys tried to cover hiding.
Well, he's used to being in Hollywood where they give him the lines.
Yeah. So while you're wrestling and making your living, even if you're not in WWF, when you're seeing these news stories come out there, like the John Stossel 2020 or whatever, is there a part of you going like, oh my God, what is happening? Especially with somebody like an Eddie Mansfield who just said, oh yeah, this is how we blade. This is how we do this. Like, what's going through your minds when those stories are being broadcast back then?
Well, the Eddie Mansfield one took place here in Georgia, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was either here in Georgia or in the Mid-Atlantic area. And Eddie was just trying to get noticed.
Okay.
He was trying to get some extra notification by TV or whatever it is to up his position. The Stossel incident, I sort of supported David on that because he was trying to protect the business.
Absolutely.
And he thought he was doing what was right. And there's probably a ton of other guys that would have done the same thing when he was confronted by Stossel. I mean, he didn't get supported like he thought he was going to, but at least he was trying to protect the business. Where Eddie was trying to expose it just for getting notoriety.
Yeah, it was all part of the same 2020 story. And I had a blast when I hosted Bob Orton and Craig DeGeorge, another WWE announcer, Craig Minervini, who went by Craig DeGeorge in WWF back in the 80s. And I had Bob Orton next to me, and it was on the anniversary of that incident. So I had mentioned it during our virtual signing, and Cowboy Bob lost his shit, cracking up laughing, and just said, yeah, he slapped the shit out of him. And yeah, I could understand why probably every guy in the locker room that night wanted to do that, because it wasn't even like he asked him, there's rumors that this is fake. John Stossel, all 5'5" of them, bellied up to Dr. D. David Schultz and said, I think this is fake. So when you watch,
and what was so bad about it, he wanted to expose the business.
Yeah.
And this is what all of us, our whole livelihoods, everything was about, making this look real. And he wanted to come out and he wanted to ruin our business. That was when I saw him do that, David Schultz, I just went, good for him,
Yeah.
But you can't do that,
I became a bigger fan when I was quote unquote smartened up, because then I said, well, wow, how do they do this? Wait, what do you mean to tell me? You mean Demolition and Strike Force are friends? You mean Smash doesn't hate Tully Blanchard after that chair shot? Like, that's the stuff that got me more.
Oh, that was a little different.
I know it was. I know. I just figured I'd throw that in there for a little bit of fun. But I have to ask, though, if kayfabe was ever something that caused a conflict for you guys in your personal lives. Now, we've talked about how Demolition got to hide behind the face paint, but you guys are fathers. You're married men. You're with your wives for many, many years. What is it like when you have children in elementary school and people put 2 and 2 together that dad is the mass superstar, or dad is Blacktop Bully, or dad's, Demolition? Like, how does that work for your children? Is there a conversation that you have with them? Do they get smartened up? Does your wife, obviously, I would imagine your wives get smartened up. If you can kind of take me into that mindset a little bit about keeping kayfabe, but still maintaining a family life.
Well, in my situation, it was just what Dad did and what my husband does. He goes to work. It's like before that, I was a teacher,
Mhm.
so I was in school, and I was fortunate enough to be in wrestling for so many years that it was just, Dad's away, he's working, he's trying to provide for us, and we appreciate what he's doing. So it never came up that uh, I never exposed them to the inside parts of it, other than the fact that, I'm okay. I'm not really hurt that bad, or, I did take some bumps and I'm bruised and sore, but I'm okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, and with me, I was when I got married, I was Crusher Khrushchev, and me and Ivan Nikita, we were hated big time down there. And when I started going out with my wife, I told her, I said, when we travel together, I'm going to drop you off, and you don't go near this building, you don't go anywhere, because I didn't know if somebody would, jump me and throw a bottle at her or whatever.
Yeah.
So, we just stayed away from those situations. And then, by the time I got to the WWF, that's when I had my son. So he was so young, he didn't realize it until, older age. But yeah, it was, I think it was tough on the wives, because they had to protect the business just like we did, and they didn't, if they went to the building, they didn't go sit with the baby faces wives. They were with the heel wives, it was,
Yeah.
that's just how it was.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's so like, it really did take the entire family to keep that going. I will say, and again, I totally appreciate and respect and understand your gentlemen's perspectives. I mean, your lives were protecting this illusion. I am of the belief, though, that if kayfabe did not go away, there would be a lot less opportunities for the gentlemen that paved the way. I mean, this podcast wouldn't exist in an era of kayfabe. None of them would. But I also think that it opens up the business to a group of fans now that can kind of be like, wow, this is pretty cool. We're seeing how things work. I still don't like the fact that we're seeing these shows be advertised on regular WWE TV, but I'm sure they have a plan for that. But what I want to talk about is peeling back the curtain during your era. Some of the agents, some of the people that made things work behind the scenes. Nowadays, they're called producers. But back in your era, there were backstage agents, as they were called. And more often than not, they were old time wrestlers from yesteryear that retired from the ring and went on to be backstage agents and producers. And I feel like it's one of the most misunderstood jobs in the professional wrestling industry. I feel like a lot of people have assumptions about what the job really is and what it isn't. I know, Bill, there was a period of time where you wanted to be an agent in WWE, and we can talk more about that. When you guys were there, what was the role of an agent and producer?
Well, the road agent would go, I think they would usually have two, if I remember correctly. And they'd be there the first thing before the guys got there,
Mm-hmm.
make sure that the ring's set up, make sure that the tickets arrangements are all established, to get the locker rooms organized, make sure that the events are going to run smoothly. And then when the talent comes in, you greet the talent and you relay messages from the office to the talent,
Mm-hmm.
what's going to transpire, the length of the matches or approximate length of the matches, the order of the matches, etc. So it's a lot involved. And then, of course, they have to stay after the matches are completed to collect the funds and tally all up.
Did they have any input on the matches itself, whether it be suggesting finishes, or did they just say, hey, you're going over tonight, or, doing the job tonight? Or did they ever really give input on what was going on in the ring? Because I would imagine on a house show, especially, like, let's say there's two tag team matches, you guys could be going against Strike Force, and then maybe they have the Heart Foundation against the Killer Bees. Are the agents for the matches listening to what you guys plan on doing, so that they're like, oh, wait a minute, no, don't do the leapfrog drop down into the power slam, they're doing that in that match? Do they have any say on what's going on in the ring?
Well, it would depend on the agent. The agents were classified different categories. Some of them more respected than the others
Mm-hmm.
because of their previous experience in the ring. A lot of the guys were main event guys, so you'd give them a little more leeway and input. Some of the guys were just appointed by the office because of longevity in the business. So it would depend on who you're getting advice from
Mm-hmm.
or suggestions from. Uh, one of them would be Pat Patterson. He was well respected. He was a main event guy. Another one would be on the other extreme, might be Rene Goulet. Nice guy, liked by the talent, but never a main event guy. So he's not going to be able to critique or develop a match like in our situation. We were in a different level than Rene had ever reached.
Okay.
So he hadn't done one. He hadn't done that many interviews. So it wasn't that he couldn't wrestle, but there was a different level that he was on than we were on at that time. So yeah, it would depend on who was giving you advice. And there was a couple guys, and Barry will probably agree with this. There was a couple guys that you'd listen to, but you didn't take any of their advice because they were butt heads.
Let it fly. Let it fly.
Yeah.
Well, we were very fortunate too because of our gimmick too. We created in the ring what we thought was, so an agent would get the finish from Pat Patterson or Vince or whoever, then they'd give us the finish, and then we would do the finish, but they wouldn't say, "Hey, here's what we need you to do tonight." I mean, it was like, you guys are professionals. You guys are going to make it happen. That's pretty much how it was with us.
Mm-hmm.
But other people, they'd critique probably the whole match.
Yeah.
And Bill and I, after when the matches are done, every once in a while you'd have some, guy come up and, like George Steele or something, maybe you guys should do this or this and this. And we'd look at him and go, yeah, that sounds good, George, but you'd never do that. I mean, you didn't want to hurt his feelings, but that wasn't the Demolition. That was George Steele eating a turnbuckle,
Exactly.
What did he know about the Demolition?
And he's one of the butt heads that I never took advice from.
And like Chief Strongbow, the nicest guy in the world and everything. And he'd make these suggestions and it would be like, well, that's probably what the Bulldogs should do, but that's not what the Demolition does. We're on the opposite end of that, and we'll let them do that to us, but we don't do that to them, So that's kind of, it was a little different story with, a lot of the guys too.
Yeah. And most of the agents would come, like Barry said, they would give us a finish and you work backwards. You got the finish, you work backwards. It's like a roller coaster going up and down, and they have the climax with the finish. So please don't try to tell us, not that we knew everything, but we knew our characters, and we knew how the character was going to get over, and we knew how the character should be treated and how it shouldn't be treated. So just give us a suggestion, and if we can work it in, we'll do it. But don't tell us what we need to do.
Yeah.
And that's different today. I think that they tell them almost everything, and you can see it.
Yeah. Now when I was like in Mid-South, in the younger days, I didn't have a clue what was going on, and Grizzly Smith, he would come in and he'd kind of critique my whole match. And then he'd say, and then do the best you can on your own and add your own things in it, so that was a different situation than, in the WWE,
And it sounds like with Grizzly there, that was more of a constructive thing where he was, trusting that you still had the knowledge to be able to add your own things as far.
Right.
He wasn't trying to give you a paint by numbers, do this, this, and this.
Right. And, the smaller territories, those guys' jobs were different than what the WWF's jobs were.
Mm-hmm.
Like Grizzly Smith would, he'd have the time watch and sit by ringside. When he'd stand up, it's time for the guys to go home. And, he had a lot more stuff on his plate to do.
I was glad to hear you both mention George Steele and Chief Jay Strongbow, because it was a number of years ago, Bret Hart did an interview where he mentioned that he had, some issues with those two, and people really piled on him for stating that. So to hear two professionals like you kind of echo those same sentiments about what they were like as agents is very interesting. But I also would imagine that for those guys, especially, it could be a tough and thankless job, which is why I'm curious to know as to why Bill had expressed an interest in having that job, because you go from being one of the boys, no matter how you look at it, to now you're management. Now
Exactly.
you are the conduit between the office, which is Vince McMahon and the higher ups, and doesn't get much higher than him at that time. And then you have the boys that you're on the road with. And we did a virtual signing through 80s Wrestling Con with Gerald Briscoe and Tony Garea. And Tony and I discussed at length some of the difficulties that took place because, you know, he would be forced sometimes to do his job because it would come from above him. And then he would have heat with the boys. And then he said there were other times where there'd be stuff that would coming from above him that he didn't agree with. And he would let Vince know or whoever know, I don't agree with this. I don't think we should do this to that guy, whatever. It could be something disciplinary or whatever. But then he still had to do it because it was his job. So those guys were constantly put, I would think, between a rock and a hard place, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, Jerry and Tony were both respected by the talent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the guys understood that. I was approached by Vince, and I can still remember it was in Rochester, New York, when I first had the first meeting with him. And I was going to be phased out of Demolition to become a road agent. Well, a number of things had transpired. One, the duties, the time frame of the duties was going to be full time, and the pay. And one of the first meetings that I had, Vince says, now you're going to do this, you're going to do that. You're not going to be one of the boys. And I underwent this transition that you're speaking of.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel comfortable doing that. I just didn't feel comfortable doing it. So we had another meeting. We had 3, I believe. And each one of them, I came to the point where I said, Vince, I don't think I can do this because I am one of the boys. And I'm not going to make that transition smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to rough my edges. So I decided not to do it.
Yeah.
Just for that simple fact. But I understood, and a lot of the things that Barry and I both knew, it wasn't coming from the agents themselves.
Yeah.
It was always coming from Vince.
Mm-hmm.
Vince had the last say on everything. Even if it was Pat Patterson, Vince was going to override Pat. But going back to what Brett had said, 2 of the agents that thrived on creating chaos were George Steele and Jay Strongbow. They loved it because they turned on the guys.
Mm-hmm.
And in our case, they tried to stir up shit that we found out about. So if I get a lot of flack from it, then put the flack on me. But Barry and I were in that situation. They tried to bury us.
Okay.
To make a headway for them. And then Vince realized, oh, they're telling a story. It didn't happen. No, it didn't happen. But I never forgot that.
Would you care to elaborate a little deeper on that?
Well, because they one of the situations was that when we ended up, there was a period of time that Vince got this idea that he's going to make the guys pay their ticket home. You're on the road for 15, 20 days. You're flying all over the country. And in this particular case, I think we were in Seattle.
Mm.
And we had to buy our ticket home. Well, it cost us the night's pay to fly home. Well, my dad was a riverboat pilot. He used to go from Pittsburgh to New Orleans and back.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't get him off the boat in New Orleans and say, find your way home. We were in Louisville, make a TV, and I approached Vince with this. And Vince says, well, George Steele said you guys were causing a chaos in the dressing room, trying to cause rebellion. And I said, about what? He said, about the ticket situation. No, I says, we weren't trying to cause a situation. We voiced our opinion. But George had made it up like we were trying to get all the other guys to rebel.
Ugh.
That was just between Barry and I. We didn't like it.
Yeah.
You know what? They changed the policy after that.
Good.
We didn't buy our tickets home after that. But I remembered that situation because George tried to bury us.
And make it look like you guys were doing something that you weren't
We
doing.
were trying to sabotage the dressing room.
Yeah.
But the difference though, with when Bill was going to be an agent and what other agents were, Bill was respected by all of the guys. I mean, when we'd have a match with everybody, they would say, Bill, what do you think? Because Bill could come up with any finish, very intellectual, the way he talks. I mean, people respected him. So Bill, I think, like when Vince said that he doesn't want you to be one of the boys, you didn't have to be one of the boys, but you could have been, because anything you said, the guys would have went along with you. You would have been a great agent, because I think you knew more than all the guys that were in the ring.
Well, I appreciate that, but I just didn't feel comfortable doing it.
I know, but if somebody came up and said, here's what I want to do for this finish, you could go with that finish, but then add something else onto it, where the guys would have appreciated that. These other guys, they couldn't come up with stuff like that. And the only other guy I know that was really like that is Arn Anderson. You and him with finishes and extra things in the ring to do. And Pat Patterson, there's only a few of those guys. So I think if you would have been an agent, it would have been phenomenal,
Well, I appreciate that. I've made some dumb decisions in my life. That might have been one.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I'm an outsider looking in, but just hearing you say that you wouldn't have been comfortable. Look, before I started doing comedy, I was a train conductor for New Jersey Transit Railroad. And one of the things that I saw over my 5 or 6 years holding that job is that there were guys that were in the field, train conductors. They were, opening the doors, doing what needed to be done for the passengers. Then we were in the yards drilling. But then they would become what was called train masters. That was the supervisor position. And much like what you guys are discussing about these wrestlers that would go on to become agents, the guys that you respected that really knew their stuff as railroaders, more often than not, they became great bosses because they understood both sides of it. They knew what it was like to be a trainman, and now they were a boss. But then every so often, there would be guys that always took the shortcuts as trainmen that then got put into those positions of power as a train master. And now they let it go to their head and they let their own insecurities take over. And it sounds like that goes on a lot with some of these wrestlers that maybe are not the most respected. And then they get into this position of power, and to justify their existence, to justify their jobs. Oh, Vince, I heard this. Bill and Barry were getting everybody riled up. No, that's not what happened.
Exactly. And it didn't always happen to us. That was the situation that we had to deal with George. But you're absolutely right. There's good guys in every line of work. There's butt heads in every line of work. And the ones that I was going to mention Arn was successful and went back from one company to the other. So yeah, it's that was just our situation with those two guys.
Yeah.
Those are the only two that I had any difficulty with. Lanza was good. They were all good with the exception of Strongbow and Steele.
Bill, I think the hardest thing you would have had, the hardest time would have been when you were an agent, would have been Vince would have said, Bill, here's what I want so-and-so to do. And then you would have said, Vince, I don't think you should have them do that. And Vince says, no, Bill, you don't understand. That's what we're going to do. Then you would say, well, why would you want to kill his, effing gimmick?
I agree. I agree. And I actually foresaw that in my own mind.
Yep.
And that's why I said I probably would have been uncomfortable doing it because you know how Vince was, Barry.
Yep.
It's either or. So, and he would have probably put me in a situation like that.
Well, he would have did that on purpose.
Yep.
With one of your friends.
Yeah. And I don't think that would happen at currently with the new regime.
Right. No.
And you know what? I mean, like the most important thing, and it doesn't matter whether you're digging ditches, working at a convenience store or whatever, when it comes to a career, you have to have peace in your mind and in your heart, and you have to be happy with what you're doing. And if you already knew that you were feeling uncomfortable in that position, then I don't think you made a mistake by doing that. But it is interesting when you hear some of the, talent talk about the agents, because I had mentioned that Bret Hart thing, and the two names that he did not have the nicest things to say about were the two names that you guys mentioned. So that gives that a lot of credibility. But now it seems like, with the exception of an Arn Anderson, who I've heard nothing but incredible things about as an agent, it seems like a lot of times these guys take the job when they're not really ready to accept that their in-ring career is over. Maybe they got injured very early on in their careers, or maybe there was just nothing for them creatively, so they settled into these jobs. And some of the feedback I've heard from the talent over the years is that, kind of like what you guys said, you're getting advice. Oh, why don't you guys do this, this, and this? Well, what the hell? You don't even know how to do that, that, and that. So why are you telling me to do it? And also, one of the things that I hear a lot is that there's some guys that are in that position now as a producer that legitimately believe they can do it better than the talent that's there currently. And I would
might be able to too, though.
They could be. But I think that creates conflict. And like you guys said, the wrestling business is all about giving back. And you guys were in positions where, you always soaked in stuff like a sponge and you learned. And you got to hope that most people, when they're in that position of power, are trying to put that forth. And it sounds like guys like Arn Anderson and Tony Garea and Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe were those types of guys. I have to ask you, though, now, because you got those WWE Legends contracts, they call you up. They say, Barry Darsow, Bill Eadie, we want you to come in, maybe not a full-time thing, maybe a couple weeks, help out, fill in. Do you say yes to that position now?
Well, like you said, if you prefaced it with a time frame or a number of days per week, I think we would probably contemplate doing it. Yeah. But if it was a full-time position, one, I'm too old to do it now, and I don't want to be on the road that much.
Mm-hmm.
I would enjoy working with the talent. I would enjoy giving some advice.
Of course.
We've been asked a number of times when we do independent events to watch matches and share our background and share our knowledge. So yeah, I mean, giving back would be good.
See, and I would have a really hard time. I can't remember so much stuff. If you asked me to give somebody a finish or something, I couldn't even do it justice anymore. Where back in the day, I could come up with anything at any time, whenever you want, but I just don't have the mind for it now. You asked me questions, and I got to really think about some of them that were 15 years ago.
Well, I think you also sell yourself a little short. You've said that numerous times, but you have, there's been quite a few gems that you've come up with where you said, oh, funny story for you. And then it comes out like it's nothing. So
that's okay. Yeah, some things are like that, but other things I can't remember crap. I mean, it's really bad,
That can be a good thing too.
Yeah, if you ever get subpoenaed, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
So I just want to move on a little bit for the last couple of minutes that we have this, because again, we started with the intro about how WWE is pulling back the curtain and showing us the writers. You guys didn't have writers. There was always a booker. In the case of WWE, I would imagine that Pat Patterson had a big role in the creative. We hear about Bruce Pritchard, but it was really Vince McMahon was the main guy. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the announcers and what really kind of gave me this idea to go this route for this episode was last week or the week before on the Search and Destroy You official Demolition Instagram page. You guys posted a great video with Sean Mooney, and it really brought back a lot of memories for me, because when I think back to being a young kid watching those Coliseum videotapes or WWF Superstars or Primetime Wrestling Challenge, when I think of Demolition being interviewed with or without Mr. Fuji, the interviews were usually conducted by Mean Gene Okerlund and Sean Mooney. What was it like when you had to do those tapes? I know you said you guys were one take guys, you wanted to get in and out, but did you ever change your interview style based on who the interviewee was? Did you have a certain strategy? Okay, today we got Mean Gene, today we got Sean Mooney. Did anything ever change based on that?
No, other than the guy that was interviewing us, no.
Mm-hmm.
We pretty well stuck to our characters. Sean was real intelligent,
Mm-hmm.
stayed on task, stayed on focus. He was, and we just got a chance to see him at WrestleCon, so it was nice catching up with him. And Mean Gene was comical. I mean, he enjoyed the business.
Yep.
He got a kick out of being around the boys, and
he was so good that he could, if you weren't a very good interviewer, he could make you a good interviewer.
Mm-hmm.
That's how good Gene was.
yeah, even if he ever screwed up, which he very rarely did, he would make it look like it was part of his interview.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, he would cover up so greatly that, the one of the things that we caught on to, and it happened by accident, and years and years and years after that, people remembered it. They used to say, "We loved it when you called Mean Gene Howard." Well, it happened because he accidentally called me Smash, and I called him. What do you mean? I'm Axe, Howard. What do you mean? You don't even know who you're talking to. And it stuck. So then I would always call him Howard, and he'd get this confused look on his face. But the people caught on too, and they loved it. So we used to do that as part of our shtick.
Yeah. Man, what I loved about him was just he brought this sense of legitimacy, like almost like a Walter Cronkite like attitude. Sean Mooney was great at kind of coming off like a little bit of a nerd and like he was intimidated and scared. And then Mean Gene, it didn't matter who he was interviewing. I mean, you could have the Ultimate Warrior doing his harsh, harsh, and Gene just standing there, like a sportscaster and just presenting it. And it was so incredible. And now over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of outtakes that have been released on social media. I don't know who released them or how they got out there, but I'm so glad that they did. And I'll send some of them to you guys if you haven't come across them. But it's basically the camera's still rolling during these promos, and it's Kamala coming in, and Gene's got a cigarette lit, and he's goofing with the camera guy. And they released, not WWE, somebody put these out on the internet, and one's with the Iron Sheik and Moolah, and it's just, it's comedy gold. And I can only imagine the fun you guys had and the laughs you must have had working with someone like him.
Well, the funny thing is, and people don't realize it, like Barry had mentioned, we might do 20 or 30 interviews in a session.
Yeah.
But Mean Gene or Sean, they had to be there all day. So they were there like 8-9 hours.
They're doing
during interviews. That was a long, long, long day for them. Then we did 2 days in a row.
Yeah. And to think that footage then had to get edited down, and then somebody had to literally deliver those tapes, right? Because it was syndication. So there was different markets. So if there's a house show in San Diego, they have to make sure that the tape of Demolition talking about Strike Force in San Diego gets sent to that market. I mean, the amount of painstaking production went into these things. I only got to meet Gene Okerlund once, unfortunately, and it was a very quick meeting. I was doing the roast of Iron Sheik back in 2008, and it was hosted by Bill Apter. After the show was over, and that show was chaotic. I mean, Scott Hall, God rest his soul, got into an altercation with one of the comedians that was an idiot, and it was chaos.
Yeah, I heard about that. I've never seen any clips of it, but I certainly heard of it. Yeah,
I'll send you some stuff. I got it all, and.
Since you mentioned the Chic, I got a Chic story when you're done here.
Oh, okay, please, yeah. And so I go to the hotel bar afterwards. I had a room that night, and I'm having a couple cocktails, and Bill Apter's hanging out, and Mean Gene Okerlund comes over to say goodnight to Bill Apter because Bill had hosted the roast, and Gene puts his hand out and said, "Bill, great job with that circus." And I'm like, "Oh my God, he sounds just like he does on TV. Like this guy is always on."
Yeah.
And Bill says, "Oh, Gene, I'd like to introduce you to my friend Ryan Marr. He was one of the comedians." And without missing a beat, Gene offers his hand, and he says, "Pleasure to meet you. Great job, and I'll see you at church." And then just walks away. And I'm like, this guy is one of the wittiest, quickest human beings. And I was very, very disappointed when Mean Gene passed away, because I mean, that guy was just a treasure. But Barry, please, I always got time for an Iron Sheik story.
So we're all in the dressing room. Everybody's laughing, everything going on and everything. The Sheik's over here. And all of a sudden, Vince walks through the door and it gets quiet in there. And the Sheik, Vince starts talking to the Sheik. You know, hey, how you doing, Sheik? You know, this and that. And how's everybody doing? And then Vince goes, Sheik, I got some news for you. It's about your drug test. And Sheik's like, what? You know? And he goes, you tested positive. The Chic jumped up. Oh, that is great. I am positive. I made it. I did not take no drugs. He's just going crazy. And then all of a sudden, Vince goes, no, you don't understand. You're positive for drugs. That means you're guilty. Oh, not so sneaky, baby. No, must be some mistake. Yeah.
He made me do it. He made me do it.
Oh man, just the characters, and like I said, we've only begun to scratch the surface. You know, here's what's funny. I wanted to do an episode. There's so much stuff that we did not even get to, and we're over the 50-minute mark. And I'm just glad that I was able to get you guys going, talking about these agents and whatnot. We could always come back and revisit this because there's just so much stuff behind the scenes that even I don't think a Netflix series will be able to properly capture. And I know things have changed a lot from the time you guys were rocking the ring in the WWE to what's going on now. But yeah, these stories need to be told. They need to be shared. And I still think that both of you have a lot to offer this current crop of talent that is in WWE, AEW, TNA, XYZ, you name it. And also people that watch this or listen to this podcast that may have aspirations of getting into the wrestling business themselves. I think that you guys have a vast array, a wealth of knowledge. And even if you're not doing it on that stage, I'm glad that we can have this podcast and talk about different things that are going on in the world of pro wrestling. I know you guys are keeping very busy. You're going to be in Montreal for 80s Wrestling Con with Tommy Fierro and that whole crew. That's going to be awesome. Check out Axe and Smash on Facebook. Check out Search and Destroy You on Instagram. Very important. Demolition Pod. We didn't even get to any of the questions tonight.
And at Real Demo Smash for on X.
Real Demo Smash on X. I know you're very active with that. I got to get back on X. It's been a while. I have to jump on there and do a little more podcast promoting on there. But please share this link, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us on Spotify, Instagram, everything. Get the word out because as you guys can tell, we just had a lot of fun recapping certain aspects, and we didn't even get to half of what I wanted to get to. We could probably do a full episode just on Pat Patterson finishes. Was he the agent you guys worked with the most, I would imagine?
At that time, yeah, he was probably the main guy. He was right under Vince. I think that Vince thought that Pat was the main guy in charge. Yeah,
he was more of a booker than an agent.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, so he wasn't on the road at the house shows going on. No, those were the other guys.
Yeah. Right. He was on the bigger shows, the bigger events, like the pay-per-views and TVs. And
or like the garden shows outright, things like that.
Correct. But Pat had a very successful career, well-respected, and a great mind for this business.
Before we do leave, I have to ask, because I cannot close the episode without talking about this man, because hell, an area of the locker room is named after him. How much of a say did Gorilla Monsoon have in what was going on? Was he just more in the gorilla position, keeping time or whatever, or did he have any input on the matches themselves?
Well, he was influential in the TV production.
Okay.
So the gorilla position was where he was. Most of the time we saw him was at the gardens or at some of the TVs. But there again, very successful and a good guy. I never heard him downgrade anybody. So I have nothing but respect for Gorilla.
Yeah, and I think, him watching all of the matches all the time, I'm sure that if he saw something that didn't look good, I'm sure it was a call right to Vince and say, Vince, you got to get this knucklehead to not do this anymore or something. I'm sure he had that kind of stroke,
Yeah, I mean, not even just watching the matches from the quote unquote gorilla position. He also did a lot of commentary and voiceover work.
Exactly.
Uh, the Undertaker recently on his podcast was talking about how Gorilla was the nicest guy, but he would ream you out if he had some kind of issue with you. And I could just imagine. There's actually a very funny YouTube page. I'll send it to you guys. There's somebody who created an AI Gorilla Monsoon podcast. And it is mind-blowing because they have the voice down pat, and it's as if Gorilla Monsoon had a podcast in present day. And just what a character. Again, another guy that we could probably devote a full episode to. But I couldn't have this episode go by without asking about Gorilla. Did I have to know, though, any gambling with Gorilla Monsoon? Ever go out into the casinos with him?
No, I never gambled. But you know, what was terrible was when Joey Morella died, his son. That was a terrible, terrible thing on Gorilla. Oh, it was bad.
Yeah, I can't even. And, you know, again, even that, you know, being a fan during that era, I had a subscription to the World Wrestling Federation magazine. And other than Monday Night Raw, you'd be watching Superstars, Wrestling Challenge, whatever, and they were taped weeks in advance. So I found out about Joey Morella's passing probably, and it happened here in New Jersey. And I probably found out a good 2 months after it occurred because there was a write-up in the WWF magazine. And that's when they acknowledged for the first time, again, back to kayfabe, full circle, that he was the adopted son of Gorilla. And I never knew that. And what a testament to what Gorilla was as a man to be able to, you know, continue going to work. I mean, he worked for the company for another number of years after enduring such a tragic loss. So definitely terrible. But like I said, we could definitely, between Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan, cover a lot of ground. But I'm glad that we had this episode because I figured, you know what, if we're going to peel back the curtain for everybody nowadays, let's talk about some of the good, bad, and ugly from back in the day. And I think you guys did a great job, more so than other wrestlers on other podcasts, breaking down the role of an agent and a producer and what they actually do. So I want to thank you guys for that. Anything else coming up that you want to mention as we close out episode 6?
Well, no, you know, I just want to mention that time goes so quickly. When you say we're going to do this many minutes, and before you know it, you know, we're almost to an hour. So I'm really enjoying this. And I thank you for moderating it for us. And I'm having a great time.
Yeah, me too. You're doing a great job. And Dan in the background that nobody sees, and he's a character too. He should be on here.
I tell Dan all the time, if he ever wants to jump in, just please, by all means. And Dan's a very patient guy because, you know what? Hey, we're peeling back the curtain. Let the fans know. I am not a tech savvy individual by any stretch. I'm very fortunate. My buddy Dave, promoter of Fight Factory Wrestling, owns Chop Sports Studios here in Matawan, New Jersey. He gets me completely set up. All I have to do is do my research. And I love telling my girlfriend that, oh yeah, I'm working from home. She's like, you're watching wrestling. I go, yeah, I'm working from home. So all I have to do is do a little bit of research and get to hang out with you guys. So it's been a pleasure, and it's going to continue to be a pleasure. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up, and all I can keep telling the folks is that if they're enjoying it, let people know about it. Keep those questions and comments coming because you guys really are two of the most fan-friendly guys that I've encountered. I mean, I love that you're always reposting the artwork that you get sent and all the cool stuff. And
yeah, there's great fans out there that send us all kind of items, and we do appreciate it. And we'll eventually get to your questions, fans. So
yeah.
In episode 3, we nailed a lot of them, and they're coming in. What I'm trying to do is take the questions. We're eventually going to set up a Patreon or a separate YouTube channel where it's going to be like live, and people are going to be able to come on and ask questions. But right now, I'm trying to link them up with the topics that we're discussing for the episodes. But guys, you can, hey, you know, get a little angry with us if you want. Jump on the YouTube comments, jump on the Instagram comments. The more you engage, the more people will see this. So please, fans, keep the questions, comments, critiques coming. We've followed a lot of your suggestions. The boys got new mics, new lights. Smash has an office, a demolition office. This is great. So
pictures falling off walls, and you know,
we're a work in progress. That's Bill Axe Edie. That's Barry Smash Darso. I'm Ryan Marr. We're going to see you guys again really soon.
Take care. Thanks.
Thank you.
Here comes the axe, and here comes the smasher.